I want you to take your Bibles this morning or open up your electronic devices, whatever you might have. I want you to turn probably to a very familiar portion of Scripture. It's the book of Psalms. I want you to find Psalms 46. We're going to look at verse 10, just a part of it, as a stepping off point of what I want to talk about this morning. While you're turning there and finding that verse, a couple things. First of all, do not miss Wednesday night if all possible. Our missions team, our missions committee is going to bring forth to you some mission opportunities that you're going to want to be a part of. And to be honest, they're changing every week. God is laying different things on our heart about different areas that we can minister to, both internationally and domestically, also locally. There's a lot of things happen. So I want you to be able to come Wednesday night and let the missions team minister to you and tell you what's going on here at First Baptist Church Fannin as far as missions are concerned. So you'll want to do that. Also, there's a missions table as you leave the foyer today, or out in the foyer as you leave the auditorium. And I want you to maybe go by there. We've got some, if you'd like to get involved in our backpack ministry, buying them backpacks for the upcoming school year for some schools. We want you to be a part of that. Also, there's some signs out there that you might want to get a hold of for the Easter time to put in your front yard. So there's a lot of things going on the missions table. So I invite you after the service to walk out there. It'll be to my left as you walk out. There'll be a table there. See what they have, pick up some information, and see what God does in your life about missions, okay? Don't forget that next Sunday we do what? Change time. How many like that time? How many do not like that time? I can tell where all the sleepers are in the house tonight. Okay? All right, that's happening next week, so pray for that. Please be here on time. Also, my heart is Ukraine today. My heart is Russia. There's so many things going on in our world, and so I want us to fervently pray for the world about us and what's happening, as I believe the times may be getting close till we see the Lord's return again. Jesus said there will be wars and rumors of wars. Nations will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. And we see that all throughout our world today, especially in that part. And my heart breaks for all these children, and especially mothers that are taking these children, trying to escape all the violence and get into Poland and different areas. And so just take some time and pray about this situation. We as children of God ought to be known for prayer. So I ask you to do that. All right, this morning, I want to continue a series that I started last week called I Quit. I Quit. And last week, we talked about I Quit Comparing. This is a very practical series. And when you think about comparing, many times you think only teenagers do that. But honestly, it goes throughout our entire life. Yes, teenagers compare themselves in many ways, but also younger people, middle-aged people, even senior adults. If we're not careful, we're always comparing ourselves to other people. We went to 2 Corinthians chapter 10 in verse 12, where Paul says it's not wise to compare ourselves or to class ourselves with other people. We shouldn't be doing that. He says that it puts us down a path that we shouldn't go down. A path that's going to lead us away from Christ. And we gave the example of the children of Israel back in 1 Samuel chapter 8. And how they clamored to Samuel the prophet, we want a king like everyone else. They were looking around, comparing themselves to everybody else, and they wanted a king. And if you look at the history of the children of Israel, that was one of their major downfalls. Because if you read 1st and 2nd Kings, there's about 20 kings mentioned, and only 5 out of the 20 are good. Can you imagine how those 15 kings led them away from God, into pagan gods, to pagan worships, all because they compared themselves to everybody around them? But also, we said last week, it puts us in a position that we don't want to be in. We're like the elder son of the prodigal son. Remember that story? What did the elder son do? He got angry. He got jealous. And when we start comparing ourselves to people around us, we also can become angry. We become jealous. And we forget how good God has been to us, because He's been good to all of us, hasn't He? And then we talked about it brings a pitfall when we compare ourselves to others. Paul said in 2 Timothy 4, Demas has left me. He's forsaken me for this present world. When we continually compare ourselves with others around us and what they have and what we don't have, it might not be long until we also trail away from God, get away from God, and lean towards this world. So last week, I quit comparing. This week, I want to talk to you about I quit striving. I quit striving. Psalms 46. Look at the very first part, verse 10. Be still and know that I am God. The New American Standard Translation puts it this way. Cease striving and know that I'm God. Here's the message for all of us this morning. Is that we have to quit striving about some things, making them the focus of our life, and rather realize that God is God and God is Lord. And so many times we strive after so many things in this life, don't we? Think about what we strive about. We strive about, for example, getting ahead. Every one of us in this room want to get ahead, don't we? So we go out, most of you will go out to a job tomorrow and you'll work 5 days a week or 6 days a week, maybe 7. And you'll work and you'll strive to do what? To get ahead, okay? To take care of your family, to take care of your children's college tuitions, to take care of whatever need might arise, to save for retirement, all these things. So we begin to strive after some things in our life. We begin to strive about getting ahead, but also we strive about getting approval. We want approval from everyone. We want to be accepted. Does everybody want to be accepted? We all do, don't we? You want to have approval, be accepted in so many areas of your life. You want the approval of your spouse. You want the approval of your children. You want to go to work tomorrow and have the approval of your colleagues. Many of you in school want the approval of a teacher or a professor. All of us want approval. So we strive after these things. We strive after getting ahead. We strive after getting approval. We strive after getting fulfillment in our lives, getting happiness and joy in our lives. Now, are any of these things wrong? No. In and of themselves, nothing that I just mentioned is wrong. It's not wrong to want to get ahead. It's not wrong to want approval from those around you. It's not wrong to get fulfillment and joy and happiness in your life and your family. Nothing's wrong with those things, except what can happen and what you have to be careful of, that in your striving for these things, that God is left out. That God is left in a corner. I can put it this way to you. In our striving, we forget our abiding in Christ. We are striving to get all of these things in our life, in our family, and those around us that we love. That sometimes, and many times, without even knowing it, we put God on a back burner. And then what happens to our spiritual life? If I'm honest, we become worn out. We no longer have time to seek God, no longer time to seek the things of God, because we're too busy striving after all these other things. So we become worn out in our spiritual life, don't we? We lose our focus on God. But where do we place our focus? No longer on the Lord, but all that we're doing. As good as it might be, our focus turns from God and the things of God to the world around us. And then before you know it, we'll come dry in our walk with God. I wonder how many today, if you're honest in your heart, you're so busy. Everyone in this room, everyone watching online, you're so busy. There's so many things going on. And you're doing all of these other things and you're trying to get ahead and get the approval and get fulfillment and satisfaction, and you look around one day and you wonder this, where's God? How come I don't feel close to God anymore? How come I don't feel near to Him? How come I can't sense His presence anymore? I just go through a devotional time. There's no meaning to it. I can't sense God in it. I read my Bible, but it's dry. I try to pray, and I pray everything I know. 3 minutes later, I'm done. Church is a struggle. All I'm saying this morning, we got to quit striving for some things if it comes in interference in our relationship with God. At least tone them down. So today, I'm going to do something I rarely do, but I'm going to do it, and I hope you will allow me to. I'm going to talk about Ron today, because what I'm about to tell you hits me square in the face. Every point I'm about to tell you. In fact, I wanted to see if God would let me do something else. How many of you know sometimes God says no? So everything I'm about to tell you, I'm guilty of. I'm guilty of. And I believe there's people here that are guilty of the same thing. So why should we quit striving after some things? Watch this, especially in the spiritual realm. Now let's talk about the spiritual realm and some things that you and I have to be careful about, and why we should not strive in these areas, because it'll cause trouble in our life. The first thing we got to watch striving for in the spiritual area is to please. Is to please. Now, right off the bat, if there's one character flaw your pastor has, that's at the very top. I do my best to try to please everybody. Now, when we were a lot smaller church, it was a lot easier. The more we grow, the harder it gets. My heart's desire is to please all of you. But how many of you know, in a crowd this size, that's hard to do? But I'm always striving for that. There's times that God comes to me and He says, son, sit down, I want to talk to you. And He reiterates to me, you can't please everybody. You really can't. Now, it runs in the family, because my wife is the exact same way. When our boys were younger, we have 2 boys, and this is what Debbie would do, my wife. Before the meal, especially at nighttime, she would say, Joseph, what do you want tonight? Matt, what do you want tonight? Ron, what do you want tonight? And some of you ladies are saying right now, that ain't happening in my house. I have a twin brother who's married to a fantastic young lady named Donna. And this is what she said when they first got married. They've been married a year longer than Debbie and I have. She says, okay, here's the way it's going to go. I'm going to put something on the table at night. You're welcome to eat it. If you don't, go hungry. Now, I don't know where you are. Please, no emails about that, okay? What happens when we're always trying to please everybody? Well, we become frustrated. Sometimes I get in my office and I just, because it's easy to get frustrated. Lord, how do you do all this? Okay? How does it work? It becomes exhausting, going around and trying to please everyone, doesn't it? And it becomes depressing, because the more you try, the further you get behind. That happens in all areas of our life, doesn't it? When you're trying to please a spouse, when you're trying to please children, When you're trying to please a boss that seemingly can't be pleased. When you're trying to please a school teacher or professor, trying to please someone somewhere, you can become frustrated, exhausted, and honestly, you can get discouraged. Now, we think about quitting this thing of striving. Who do we need to quit striving for? This might surprise you. First of all, for God. For God. Many of us are striving so that we can be good in God's eyes. I'm the world's worst. Now here's how it goes if you're a pastor. If I pray for 30 minutes, I should have prayed for an hour. If I read my Bible for 30 or 45 minutes, I should have read it for an hour and a half. If I get up at 6 o'clock, I should have get up at 4 o'clock. I heard a pastor say the other day, he says, we used to read books and have guilt trips about not getting up quite as early as some of the old time pastors did. They brag about getting up 4 in the morning 100 years ago. But he said what they forgot to tell you is they went to bed at 6 o'clock. I've spent a majority of my Christian life, and I'm not proud of this, but I'm honest with you, trying to please God. I grew up in a religion and a denomination that was very hard-nosed. How many know that you used to go to church and you couldn't walk when you went out because your toes were stepped on? Anybody know what I'm talking about? So I've ingrained in me, whatever I do, I've got to do more. And God has to come to me and say, Ron, you got to quit striving to please me. Jesus, when he was baptized, when he came up out of the water, do you remember what the Bible says? He heard the voice from heaven that said, you are my beloved Son, whom I'm well pleased. What you got to remember is he never did a miracle prior to that. He never even started his ministry till then. He never did a miracle. He never did anything for the Father. And the Father says, I'm well pleased with you. So many of us in this room, many watching online, we're trying to do what? We're striving after trying to please God. And I get that to a certain degree, and that's worthwhile to a certain degree. But for me, and maybe for some of you, you can take it overboard. So if you're that way today, listen to me. Get alone with God. God is not a taskmaster that says you got to do this and do that, this time and that time. I want more, I want more. He's not. He's a loving Father that so appreciates anything you do for him. So we got to cut striving after who? After God in that way, but also after others. Trying to please everybody around us. I thought about this week. Do you know that more people walked away from Jesus' ministry than came to it? Did you realize that? We think all these crowds coming to Jesus, and they did, but more of them walked away than came to him. Why? Listen, Jesus couldn't please them all. He couldn't please the religious people. He couldn't please the Gentiles. And so many walked away from God, walked away from him. Who are you trying to please today? Many of you wives are trying to please a husband that can't be pleased. No matter how good you do the house, there's still some dirt. No matter how you try to keep it clean, it's not clean enough. No matter what you fix, it's not good enough. Something else needs to be done. Or maybe trying to please our children. This generation have so much, do they not? Just get them something else. Give them something else. And I get that. But trying to please everybody, trying to please a boss that says, you need to give me 10 to 12 hours a day, might not be the best thing for your family, might be the best thing for your walk with God. I know a good friend of mine who spent an entire life trying to please his dad, trying to please him. You know what? He came up short every time. Who are you trying to please today? Stop striving after that to in a healthy way. Quit striving after God in a healthy way. And then you have to quit striving after to please you. I don't know about you. Here's what I do. I place the bar high on myself. Does anybody do that? Let me see your hand. I am a perfectionist. There, I admitted it. Okay? I am a perfectionist. Any perfectionists in the house? I am. Ask my staff. I'll tell them, I want them to do something. I'll say, you got plenty of time. You know what that means? They'll tell you what that means. I want it done in the next 30 minutes. Report back to me. There came a point in my life, both personally and professionally, I was exhausted. Not only could I not please God the way I thought I could please God, I couldn't please other people. And ultimately, I couldn't please myself. And God said, son, if you're going to last in this thing called ministry, if you're going to last in this thing called the Christian life, then you're going to have to stop this thing of trying to please everybody and just come to me. But there's a second thing I want you to see this morning. I quit. I quit striving. Quit striving for what? To please. But second of all, to perform. To perform. I distinctly remember, now don't get mad at me, I'm a Yankee. Oh, and some of you are not coming back, are you? I'm from Indiana, that's where I was born. And I distinctly remember as a little boy, my dad always loved the hot weather. Thus, we came to Mississippi. He's got sick of snow. Anybody from the north got sick of snow? I know Glenn has. Anybody else? Yeah, a lot of folks got sick of snow. That's hard to say right there. Anyway, I remember he wanted to go to Florida. So we all got in the car, and Dad took us to Florida. And my dad always loved wild animal shows on TV. Does anybody remember Mutual of Omaha? Oh, my God. We watched that every week. If it was replayed, we'd watch it again. So he had the bright idea, my dad did. He wanted to take us to an alligator farm. Because I guess that's what you do in Florida, right? And I distinctly remember, don't remember how old I was, but I remember. And I don't remember anything about going to the alligator farm but this one thing. This guy got up, got an alligator, okay, and he put his head in the alligator's mouth. Anybody ever seen that? We need to pray for that brother, right? I don't know if they still do that, but I distinctly remember my eyes got big. He put his head in an alligator's mouth. And that's always stuck with me. Now, here's my question to you. Why didn't an alligator clamp down? They tell me Kenny Prince would be better at this than I am. He was a game warden for years. But if you come anywhere around an alligator's mouth, what's he going to do? Now, how could that man put his head in an alligator's mouth and that alligator not clamp down? Because they had taught that alligator to do what? To perform. That alligator knew if he could restrict himself and not bite down, there was going to be a lot more food afterwards. And so he didn't do it. Many of us today, we perform for God. That's what we do. Here's what we do. We say, God, if you'll take care of us, if you'll meet our needs, if you'll be there when I need help, then God, I'm going to do what you've asked me to do. And literally what we're doing, and I did it for years, we're performing for God, just like that alligator. Now, How do you know that you're performing for God? When does it become real to you that instead of having a loving, intimate relationship with God, you're performing for God, you're doing your part, so God will do His part? How do you know you're doing that? And it finally dawned on me one day, this is what I was doing. Everything was going fine until something happened. And the first time something happened that I didn't understand or I didn't like, you know what I'd say? But God, I did this for you. God, I read my Bible every day this week. Now look at this problem. God, I prayed this week. I had a quiet time. God, I even put some money in the offering plate. When that comes up out of our heart, when that comes up out of our mouth, listen to me, we're performing for God just like that alligator. Many, many Christians, maybe many of you in this auditorium today, maybe online, many online, you're performing for God. So nothing bad will happen to you. Nothing will happen to your family. Nothing will happen to your friends. Nothing will happen to your belongings, your possessions. So you're trying to check all the boxes. God, I'm doing everything I know to do, so you'll keep everything at bay for me. How many know that doesn't work? We don't perform for God. But rather, listen to me, we abide in God. Look, if you will, now in John chapter 15. John chapter 15, look at verse 4. Abide in me and I in you. As a branch cannot bear fruit of itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. We don't perform for God. We abide in God. One day, many people were coming to all the miracles Jesus was doing. And Jesus made a statement. He said, unless you people see signs and wonders, you'll by no means believe. Soon as the miracles quit, guess what? The people quit. It was all a performance. Jesus got tired of it. It wasn't a show. The miracles were to show, hey, I'm the Son of God. I've come to this earth and I'll go to a cross and die for the sins of the world. Unless we see God doing something for us, working it all out the way we think we ought to work it out, then we'll perform for Him. But let something go awry, something go off the track. Let someone get sick, lose a job. That spouse say, I no longer love you anymore. I'm leaving. Then the performance is over. We go to God bewildered. God, what happened? And begin to tell God all we've done for Him. No. We don't perform. We abide in God. But we also trust in God. Look at Psalms 37, verse 5. Commit your way to the Lord. Trust also in Him, and He shall bring it to pass. Isn't abiding in God and trusting in God a long way from performing for God? And then we rest in God. Look at Hebrews 4 and verse 10. For he who has entered his rest has himself also ceased from his works as God did from His. Your Christian life is not a performance. God up in heaven, you're on the stage called earth trying to perform for God. It's not that. Rather, it's abiding in God, this close personal relationship with Him. It's trusting God no matter what comes into your life, good or bad. And then you learn to rest in God, that it's all going to be okay. Our daughter-in-law now is going through cancer, and thank you for many of you praying for her. But what do? We abide in God. We trust God. And we rest in God as we lean upon His Word and claim His promises to us. So this morning, we've all, including this pastor, we have to quit. We have to quit striving to please, striving to perform, but lastly, striving to persuade. Now, I'm going to be real honest with you right here, the next few minutes, and we'll close. I go home every Sunday, typically, and I watch the service. The music every week is wonderful. Gray, praise team, choir, specials are wonderful. But then I get to me. First of all, I don't like looking at myself, okay? That might be a problem there in itself. I don't know. But then I look at what I said. And I think to myself, if I just said it different, if I just said it with a little bit of emotion, if I just said it in a different way, maybe somebody would have came. Maybe someone would have given their heart to Jesus. Somebody would have got their life right with the Lord if I'd have done this and I'd have done that. Because you don't understand, preachers, in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, Paul lists all that he went through, and then he said this, besides all this, it's the daily pressure of pastoring churches. You have no idea what a pastor puts on his shoulders because we care about you. We care about you watching online. We care about you. It's all for you. So I think if I could have persuaded them, told another story, told another illustration, if I could have said it this way or that way, but then the Lord comes to me and he says, Ron, my son, on the triumphal entry, Palm Sunday, which we'll celebrate in a few weeks, what did the people do? They took palm branches and laid it before the Lord as he came into town. They took off their own coats and jackets and laid it on the ground. But what happened 1 week later? They crucified. Couldn't Jesus be persuasive enough? Why couldn't everybody just drop to their knees and know God's in their presence? What else did he have to do? How many more signs, wonders, and miracles did he have to do? How much more teaching did he have to do? And they still didn't come. Oh, the Apostle Paul, mine and probably your favorite character, or one of your favorite characters in the Bible. What a man. Wrote so much of our New Testament. And he went into the synagogues and other places and he preached. But most of them weren't persuaded to the point they stoned him. Left him for dead one time in Derby. John the Revelator. We'll be starting the book of Revelation on a Wednesday night. I think it's the 23rd, if you're interested in that. But what did they do to John? They exiled him to the island of Patmos. How much more you got to persuade? What else do I have to do? What else does a preacher have to do? What else does a mom and dad have to do? What else does a grandparent have to do? Heaven is real, but also hell is real. So this morning, here's my thought for all of us. Some things we got to quit striving for. I know you're striving to get ahead and approval, find fulfillment in this life. I get it, and that's fine, as long as you keep it in balance. But it's hard to do. Spiritually, we got to stop trying and striving to please God, others, and ourselves. Got to stop it. Okay? Not to perform any longer. Not to check a box so God will take care of you and nothing bad will happen to you. No. What about your heart today? How can I persuade you that the best thing you can ever do is give your life to Jesus, to walk with Him? Because the days on this earth are very short, and they'll be gone.
Thank you for tuning in to our live stream. We hope you were encouraged by both the worship music and today's message. If you have any questions about your faith or would like to speak to our pastoral staff, we would love to hear from you. You may call the church office at 601-829-1004 or contact us on our website at fecfannin.org.